Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Author Journey. I'm Anne O'Connell, and boy, have we got a very special guest for you this week. Every week we have great guests, but this week we're going to shake it up a little bit. We have an industry expert joining us today rather than an author this week, and she's going to help us understand some of the complexities of book marketing. We all know how tough that can be in a competitive environment like we're in right now. So today we have Tresa Chambers joining us, who's the founder and CEO of 10th Muse Enterprises. She provides a space and platforms to empower Black and Brown creative entrepreneurs, authors, and artists from historically marginalized groups everywhere to increase economic and community stability through their talent. A former business and political journalist at Time Magazine, publisher director at Reader's Digest, and brand marketer for Goosebumps and other books by R.L. Stine, Tresa has used her expertise as a writer, editor, B2B marketer, and project manager to create and launch programs and products in corporate, academic, and community arenas from New York City to South Florida to Silicon Valley and the world for more than 25 years, driven by the desire to have measurable, positive, impactful outcomes. Ms. Chambers has received her Master of Science degree in publishing from Pace University in New York. She completed a master's certificate in integrated communications, advertising, and PR at Florida International University in Miami, and her BA in French at the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. Tresa currently lives in Fort Lauderdale, and she's a wine enthusiast, enjoys walking for wellness, and supports initiatives that promote literacy, nutrition, and creative expression. And so I would love to bring Tresa up to join me in today's author journey. Hi, Tresa.
Hi, Anne. Great to see you.
Nice
Thanks
to
for having
see
me.
you. Oh, it's totally my pleasure. We have so much in common and so much to unpack today. Welcome to the author journey.
Thrilled to be here. Thank you.
It's great to see you. And I lived in Fort Lauderdale for 14 years, and I desperately miss it, especially this time of year.
Oh, yes. It's
Well, we're
lovely.
hoping to see some spring coming, right?
Yes, hopefully for you.
Oh my goodness. So, like I said, we have so much in common, and not just in the publishing realm, but and I touched on some of your background, but talk a little bit about your experiences and what led you to where you are today. I know we're just the Reader's Digest version. We could be here for a while, but it's just fascinating.
So, Reader's Digest is a really great reference point because I started out on the editorial side of the publishing industry,
Mhm.
but then Reader's Digest was part of my entry into marketing. So, as the publishing director for their special interest publication, Family, Your Family is what it was called,
Mhm.
was a really pivotal point for me in really getting steeped in marketing. And so that was a great opportunity to learn about list marketing, learn about production, learn about strategies to target in business, in publishing specifically. And so it really did give me a great chance to start to learn about marketing. And
Mhm.
then from there, had the opportunity to kind of move in and out of the publishing industry, but always stayed with marketing from there. As a matter of fact, I left Reader's Digest and relocated to South Florida in 2001. And
Mhm.
it actually happened to be the week before 9/11. So it was a pivotal time. And
Certainly.
there was a lot of change, but I stayed true to the marketing work as long as I could. But then I had to step out, but that gave me an opportunity to take on the role of running this arts-based family literacy program in Miami. And so there were these through lines in my career up to that point, as far as telling the stories of different individuals from an editorial perspective, but then going into telling the stories of different brands. And that was before everyone had a personal brand. Uh, so it was still, it was still important to understand the essence of brand and really develop the brand values and attributes that a corporation had. And so I've been able to leverage that for the work that I do in marketing. But when I had that break with working in the marketing industry specifically and doing the work at running the Arts-Based Family Literacy Program, this was at a university, and we were serving under-resourced communities in Miami. There was an opportunity for me to collaborate with arts organizations and community-based businesses, as well as thought leaders in this area of elevating creative talent and art, at the same time advancing literacy. And that's something that has always been an intersection for me in the work that I do. So,
and how wonderful, wonderful that you were able to sort of blend that all together in creating 10th Muse Enterprises. And I love what you were saying about, people as a brand. And it's been more of a recent, like tsunami, if you will, of that. So I guess one of my questions is, focusing in on authors, what are the biggest challenges? Everybody, is putting their face forward, talking about their brand, but creating platforms and things of that nature. But in your experience in the work that you do, what are some of the biggest challenges that authors are facing?
Well, there are two. The first one is just the sheer number of authors out there. I was at a recent workshop, and the presenter spoke about how before we had Amazon for book sales, there were about 125,000 books purchased a year, and they were distributed through three main channels. And that was the library, through book clubs, and through bookstores, brick and mortar. And in 2023, there were 20 million books published. Okay. And so you can see how that's a challenge to be able to find your audience and stand out. And so that's where the branding has become critical. Being able to differentiate yourself and to be found is the other issue. It's that discoverability that is really important. So and the other part of that, though, so that's one, discoverability. The other part, though, is that many authors will publish their book, but they don't realize that hitting the publish is just the first step in getting your book out there. So they don't think about having a brand, or even that they're in a business, or they are a brand. And so a lot of that prep work hasn't been done. And really publishing your book, it starts way before you hit publish.
Right. And you've hit the nail on the head, and it just springs another question to mind. One of the things that you do is you help an author leading up to that moment where the publish button is hit. So talk a little bit about that timeline. Like, how far ahead of time do you start working with an author? And what are just, some of the basic steps that you would take them through?
Absolutely. Well, I recommend that an author starts marketing at least 3 months in advance, and 6 months is ideal. But for self-published authors, you typically have a limited budget. And so I understand that you may have to wait until it's closer to the time of launch. But it's really important to do the steps as much as possible, as far in advance as possible as you can, before the launch date. And the reason is that there are things that can help you with those sales, which everybody, at the end of the day, your goal is to sell as many books as possible. People talk about having a bestseller. What you do before the book gets released really does impact whether your book is a bestseller or not. And let me just add here, I'm not just talking about being called an Amazon bestseller because you're in an obscure category, because that really doesn't help you in terms of getting the return on your on the investment that you've made already.
Let's
Really
talk a
is
little
about,
bit about,
sure.
let's talk a little bit about that. And I had to move my light. I could see I was very bright. Sorry about that. Um, and that's a huge thing that a differentiation that you've made there. It's not that difficult to get that little banner that says #1 bestseller, hot new release.
Right.
And the majority of the authors that I've worked with have gotten that banner, and you capture that screenshot as quickly as you can. And
Yes.
can you explain why that is? Talk a little
Well,
bit about that.
absolutely. It's because that you can have a bestseller and it could last for a day, maybe a couple of hours. And that banner is based on the way that your book is categorized. And so, like I said, if you're in a very obscure category, imagine that your book is about it's about healing through uh, palm leaves. I'm just making that up, of course. And so if you're categorized according to healing and palm leaves, and that's the intersection of where your book sits as a category, then how many books have been released on that day that have that category? There are probably no others. And so yeah, you are the #1 bestseller. But is that going to help you with your sales? You could have
Mhm,
sold one book and
mhm,
that would
yeah,
be make you the bestseller. So that's not really helpful,
right.
although that
And I think,
matters.
yeah, I think the other thing that is confusing for a lot of people and is misunderstood is getting on the Times bestseller list,
Yeah.
or the USA Today bestseller list. Well, those are pretty out of reach for published authors because I mean, in your experience, is that the case? Like, I'm making this statement from from what I've seen, but
From your experience.
tell us a little bit about that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And so,
Mm.
unfortunately, for self published authors, it is extremely unlikely that your book will be listed on the New York Times bestseller list because it's driven by traditional publishers and the way that they market. And
Mhm.
so, that's not likely. The number of books to be sold also is really going to inform
Mhm.
whether you're going to hit those numbers, right? Hit that list, which means, again, that you have to invest and you have to sell thousands of books before your book is even released,
Mhm.
which most of the time self published books aren't
Mhm.
sold at those numbers. That said, I do want to add that if you have an intention to publish more than one,
Mhm.
having a successful release and getting yourself in a position that would allow you to have a traditionally published book the
Mhm.
next go round, you have an advantage.
Mhm.
And I really do think that it's important to note that doing a quality book, getting the book formatted properly, having the book properly edited, all of those things help with your sales. And those are things that put you in a better position for your marketing as well, because
Absolutely.
that's going to generate those bigger sales and bigger hits and
Absolutely.
a bigger
And I
audience.
think, yeah, and what we're seeing now, even, self and indie published authors can sell a lot of books, and they
Yeah,
can, get to a point where they're a bestseller, in different circles. Talk a little bit about that discoverability. Like, that's the sweet spot, and I talk about that a lot with my authors. You know, you're not going to be found unless you're in a place to be found. So, what is important in an author platform? Like, what are some of the things that you advise the authors you work with to do first and
absolutely.
foremost?
Sure. Well, I work primarily with nonfiction authors,
Mhm.
and that means that, and the reason I do that is because they're seeking to position themselves as thought leaders in
Mhm.
their industries. And what happens as a result is the strategy that I use is that we're not selling the books one at a time. We're positioning them, developing their brand, and getting them in front of audiences that are paying
Mm-hmm.
for their presence more often than not,
Mm-hmm.
as well as purchasing their books at quantity. And at
Mm-hmm.
the end of the day, we know that the book sales are the thing that matter. So,
Mm-hmm.
having a bestseller is great, but selling more of your books is really what you're going for, right? And
Yes.
so, getting clear about your author platform is your brand. What is
Mm-hmm.
your position? What is your expertise? What can you speak about? And it's certainly it comes from your book, but it's not only coming directly from your book, but your book is positioning you as an opener for all the things that you're knowledgeable about and can talk about.
Mm-hmm.
So it's allowing you to connect with your audience and multiple audiences who didn't know you existed. But if you can put yourself out there, what I help you do is get that clarity
Mm-hmm.
around what your subject matter expertise is and being able to articulate it very simply, and then getting you clear about who is going to buy your book. The
Mm-hmm.
idea of marketing is something that people don't like, but what marketing really is finding the people who you are trying to connect with. It's about connecting with your
Yeah.
market.
And
And
where they
that's
hang
really
out.
the essence of what I did. Yep.
Where
And then
they
spend
hang out.
time with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In
That's it.
person and virtually, right?
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
And
And virtually, you can reach even more people, right? Because you're not
exactly.
limited by geography.
Mm-hmm. And you work with authors from all over the world, and even
Yeah.
most recently you were in my neck of the woods, a little further west of me, in Toronto. Like, how did that go?
Yeah. So I was in Toronto actually with a children's book author, as it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And we were there with the illustrator who is based in Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a great event where we had a chance to do a couple of things. The author was able to do a reading, the illustrator was able to talk about his process for creating the designs that went along with the story.
Mm-hmm.
And they talked about how they got together, collaborated, and ended up making this beautiful story that resonates with the Caribbean community. So
Nice.
the author's Caribbean American, the illustrator is Caribbean Canadian. And so that instantly allowed for them to expand the market reach for this
Mm-hmm.
book.
Oh, that's wonderful. And I love that. And of course, we publish children's books as one of our genres. And it's always so amazing to watch an illustrator take a manuscript and bring it to life, which is one of my favorite parts of the process, right?
Exactly. It's
And
lovely.
so talk a little bit about, what from a children's author perspective or even a fiction author, what types of things could an author pull from that might set them as an expert? Not just I'm an author and I write this, but what are some of the things they could pull maybe from their background?
So I love the example of the children's book author, as a matter of fact,
Mm-hmm.
because she does have that Caribbean background. And so being able to tell a story, infuse that experience into her story, but also being able to expand it to connect all of the different nuances of the culture. So at the event itself, we had the storytelling, we had the art, we also had food. We had
Mm.
Caribbean food, and that was something to right. It's like you don't want to miss
Mm.
that. And we were able to talk about all of the aspects of people's identity, and that's something that she can share. But the
Yeah.
other part that was really valuable is that this author is also a self-published author, and she's able to talk about the experience, the process of creating a children's book, the
Mm-hmm.
journey from idea into bringing this story to life.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that is unique to her because of her experience.
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, we're able to talk about how her characters might evolve into additional stories.
Mm-hmm.
And that creates additional opportunities with regard to a brand. So, as I said, I work with Goosebumps books, right? That was character licensing. So we had this huge series of books that had these interesting characters, but it was the Goosebumps brand itself that was translated into products that included, t-shirts, a television show. A television show is a licensed product. Apparel, clothing. We even opened an attraction at Disney. So there are all kinds of things. So as the brand grows, and that's something for authors to think about, this is a long game. So you have to think about your growth strategy. So you're starting out moment one, you're really trying to build your audience and your following. But as you build your brand, new opportunities can be presented to you. It takes time and you have to be intentional. You are a business. You are a business. And so if you think like a business, then you can put together a plan for growth. And the marketing has to be a critical component of that.
Yeah. I love what you say. It's the long game. And this probably doesn't apply as much to somebody who's like, I have one book in me, I'm going to get it written, I'm going to get out there, and then I'm going to move on. So unless, you're okay with it languishing, the rest of this is so critical, that long game. And I love what you were talking about, like all of the moving pieces as far as licensing goes. I've talked to a couple of my authors about animation, and I do know authors who are currently adapting books to screen, small screen or the big screen kind of thing. So when you look at somebody like yourself, who has this extensive 25-year background, behind the scenes, so to speak, I think that's incredible. And it really is illustrative of how important it is for authors to find those partners in the business to help them, move to the next level. So what do you do with an author who is painfully shy? So, you want to encourage them to get out there, to put their face forward. In my background in PR and marketing, I did lots of media training. Do you do any of that kind of thing to help somebody kind of come out of their shell?
I absolutely do. I will help with media training, but I also really believe in the idea that I don't want someone to force someone to be what they're not. And there are plenty of ways that authors who are very shy can be successful without having to go on camera, without having to, be interviewed and, do those very extroverted kinds of things. And so I work with them on a strategy that makes sense for them. And so, yes, there are the obvious. Yes, there's media training, there's interviews, there's social media broadcasts and podcasts and things like that. But there are also other ways that authors can really build their brand. Like I have a client who loves to write. She's written a book, but also now she's blogging, and she's blogging about her book, and she's growing her audience that way. So she doesn't necessarily have to be seen all the time, but her words resonate, and she's prolific in that. So there are other ways, there are other strategies to do that. There are excerpts that you can draw excerpts from your book and repurpose that content on different platforms, right? You can pitch to other publications, to, you've read magazines where you've seen excerpts from books. Those are strategies that folks who may not be as willing to be in front of the camera can get their work out there and build their brand. So there's many strategies.
Draw on your strengths as a writer.
That's right.
I love that. Repurpose the content you already have.
That's right.
And I think it's really important to find authors in your genre who are doing a good job of that and see how they're doing that, right?
That's exactly right.
And so you mentioned podcasts. I think you have a podcast, don't you?
Well, I had a podcast and I'm going to have a podcast. I love podcasting. I'm a big fan. So
excellent.
And they're really great. And a lot of people don't really understand how to leverage podcasts to build their audience. So I'll share this tip. You know, when you think about going on a podcast, you have to ask these questions about who the audience is that's the podcast is accessing, that's accessing the podcast, excuse me. And so if you know, there are many author podcasts, but if your audience is cat people, then maybe your book is about cats, or a character that's a cat, or a character who loves cats, then connecting with podcasts that are about cats could be a really great way for you to build your audience, right? For example. So you have to be a little bit creative. As a marketer and with my clients, I'm that thought partner as well, where we talk about what your interests are, what you're really trying to achieve. And then we think about what are those best platforms to do it. So podcasts are great because there are so many of them, and they are looking for people to come on if they are an interview oriented podcast. But being able to bring that value, bring something interesting and unique is really, really appealing to podcasters. And there are platforms that are available where you can find out what those opportunities are. And
that was my next question.
Yeah.
What's an easy platform to access for somebody who's not really technically savvy? Like if an author is watching and they're like, "Ooh, I wouldn't mind doing a podcast or being a guest on a podcast," where would you direct them to start looking for the right podcast?
Sure. So there's a platform that was recommended to me called Podmatch, and you can join that. You could try it out for free, and you can add your profile, and it's a pretty low posting, low subscription monthly. And they actually literally, you put your information in, and you can look for podcasts on there, but the algorithm will actually match you with shows that are looking for you based on the information that you put in. And you have the option to accept or not accept, and you can pitch them. But everything is done within the platform. So it's really very, very easy to use. I highly recommend that.
That's awesome. That's a really great Podmatch, Podmatch. What a great little tidbit there. I'm going to bring up your website. So tell us a little bit about the services before we wrap up.
Absolutely.
10th Muses. Talk about this a little bit.
So, and really that's about harnessing all the creativity that we have within each of us. And my goal is to bring it all out, to inspire your creativity and harness it and bring it out into the world. And so that's what my services are about. And with authors in particular, I like to help with doing that strategy, planning your launch, getting you press. I focus on national media primarily, but also with when you're doing your book launch and you're local, you want to get that visibility in your community or wherever you're going to be doing your launch. So I help with the press release. All of that is part of strategic communications plan that I develop for my clients. And then doing that media pitching, and also doing the pitching for those paid speaking opportunities. Publishing a book does make a difference in terms of being able to get paid a certain amount by having that expertise. So putting together a strategic plan to leverage all of that based on what the goals are that you have. People also don't remember that getting that review is important. Getting an independent review is important. I work with them on that, as well as submitting to prizes and contests is really, really helpful in terms of brand building and connecting with your audience. And I help with that, and then put it all on a timeline that makes sense for the author, because like I said, there's pre-work, there's launch work, and then there's post work, because this is a long game.
And especially when you're looking at getting reviews, right? Because you need to get like 3-4 months before publication date, you need to have books in hand to supply to potential reviewers, especially any of the trade pubs, right?
That's absolutely right for the
Mm-hmm.
trade pubs.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also suggesting that submitting your final manuscript to get like a Kirkus review or a
Mm-hmm.
Book Life review or an indie reader review, because
Mm-hmm.
those are third party reviews. I also highly recommend that you really think about who in your community, who you're connected to, who is the most influential person that you know and who's affiliated with the biggest brand that you know, and send them your book and
Mm-hmm.
get them to and most people have someone in their network
Mm-hmm.
that they can pass on the book and get that reputable brand association, get that
Yep.
endorsement. It's
Yep.
very, very helpful.
Oh, when I wrote my first novel, I sent a copy to Oprah and one to Ellen, just in the hopes. I'm thinking it's
Yes.
sitting in an envelope on the floor somewhere, right? You never know when it's gonna like resurface, but you just don't know. You got to
Absolutely.
shoot for the stars, and you don't get if you don't try. So
That's
I
right.
can't believe like our time is already up, but I
Oh my
also wanted
goodness.
to. I know. I'm assuming that Tent Muse Enterprises is where someone would go to get
Yeah,
any contact information to reach out to you. I also
absolutely.
wanted to let everybody know that, let me just switch this over. Uh, there we go. Tresa will be joining our Saturday sessions workshops coming up in April. Here we are. And on the 27th, she will dive a little more deeply into all of those amazing elements that we just touched on here. So we're really excited about that. Tresa, for you to join us at the end of April.
Yes, I am so looking forward to that. Yes, because we can definitely do a deeper dive. I'm looking
Mhm.
forward to talking more with you, and that's going to be a great experience. I know because I could talk about this all day with you and with everybody. So I look forward to answering any questions that folks might have, and shoot me, and a message on LinkedIn. Connect with me there as well, or follow me on Instagram at Muse with Me.
Okay. And so are those social media links on your website as well?
Yes, they are.
Musenterprises.com. Well, Teresa, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you. I can't believe how quickly that went.
Me neither.
But we're looking forward to continuing the discussion and having
Yes.
you join us for the Saturday sessions. And hopefully, we'll continue collaborating and helping folks get their stories out. So I really appreciate you joining me and giving us some of those wonderful tidbits today.
Thanks so much for having me, Anne. It has been a pleasure. I look forward to continuing these conversations. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And thank you all for joining us on this week's author journey. We'll see you again next week as we explore more in the wonderful world of writing and publishing and everything that goes along with it. So for now, I'm Anne O'Connell. I'll say goodbye and we'll see you again on the author journey.